Hello, and welcome to the Infinite Love Podcast. This is a place where we share how love can transform negative emotions and pain into strength. We talk about all things related to love, positivity, and kindness. And I am your host, Corinne Camara. Hi, welcome to episode 11, From Miscarriage to Building Community. Today we're going to speak to Allison Schaaf, founder of Miscarriage Hope Desk. After years of reoccurring miscarriage, 5 in total, Allison realized there was a need for a resource to help others endure reoccurrent loss. This inspired the creation of Miscarriage Hope Desk, a resource she wished she had through her years of long fertility struggles. Allison is passionate about helping other women experiencing miscarriage to not feel alone and to help them connect to a valuable resource and help them see that they have options for moving ahead. Let's get into today's episode. Hi, welcome to the Infinite Love Podcast. It is so great to have you, Allison, here today. And I'm so touched by your story, and I can't wait for people to hear about your journey.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to chat with you today.
So I like to start off the show with something called the love lesson. And the love lesson is what in your life that you had to go through that brought you to your knees, that created this certain level of transformation. And the transformation has now inspired you to work on helping others.
Yeah, it's a good question, a loaded question. So for me, it would be my fertility journey, which was very, as most, unexpected. For those that have struggled with fertility, they can probably relate. I went into starting a family thinking, the biggest decision I had to make was how many kids do we want? So
Right.
Pretty naive. And quickly ran into an issue of miscarriage and then recurrent miscarriage that just sort of kept happening. It almost became a cycle. So definitely, when you say brought me to my knees, I mean literally, right? It was through that journey of a few years, a total of 5 miscarriages in total. But also some happy parts in that story. And then from that, I created Miscarriage Hope Desk, which is one way for me to kind of share my story, but also just give a voice to others that have gone through pregnancy loss and recurrent loss. Something that I found is, often not talked about enough. A lot of times people don't share what's happening, and it can be a very lonely place to be. So.
Yeah, I feel like I work with a lot of women that are going through their own fertility journey with acupuncture, and it is very devastating having miscarriage over miscarriage. And I find that many of those women don't have a place to vent or have other people understand their grief. And wouldn't you say there's a lot of shame around it too, where people don't want to talk about it?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a lot of guilt, shame, especially a lot of times people don't get answers as to why, so there's having to deal with kind of this unknown of what's causing this. And sometimes, there's just not an explanation, which is very hard to kind of wrap your head around, or at least for me, it has been.
Mm-hmm. So what was your process of getting to a place of balance and transformation? Can you tell us a little bit about what internal work you needed to do or to get to a place where you were like, okay, now I could start talking about this?
Yeah, for me, one, kind of allowing myself the time and space to grieve. That was something, grief was honestly kind of new to, I don't know, I hadn't suffered a lot of loss in my life. So having to grieve each time, having to learn that me and my husband grieve very differently. That took a few to figure that piece out. And really also just figuring out a way to kind of, I feel like this happens sometimes, and it can happen both ways, right? Like if you see that your life is going positive, you kind of feel like you're like on this positive spiral. But with the miscarriages, I always say like the feeling of it to me was like almost like a downward spiral, right? Like I felt like it kind of kept happening. And so then it kind of got worse. And then my whole life it just kind of consumed my life, and it just felt like I was kind of headed down, which is not a great place to be. And for me, getting out of that, actually at one point was, along the way, I told my husband multiple times, like, I don't know when I'm going to say enough is enough, but there's going to be a point where I can't keep doing this, right? Like, and so that's something I like to remind people too that are going through it, is like, you can say, hey, like, I need a break. I need to stop. I can't take it. And so it was, for me, after my third miscarriage. So a lot of mine were pretty early losses. The third was a little bit longer, and I was maybe like 11 weeks, but I've been extremely sick. So horrible morning sickness, like everything was pointing to like, this was the one. And I, very excited about the path we were on and everything. So I was very optimistic and very shocked when I went into ultrasound and there was no heartbeat. And I think after that third one definitely was probably the lowest of the lows. And it was in that moment that I was like, look, I can't, I kind of raised my flag and I'm like, I can't keep doing this. And had that kind of breakdown moment. And then for me, it was really, one, grieving, like just literally crying a lot, and then getting quiet and meditating, but also for me, it was a lot of prayer and listening. And in that time of prayer and listening, there was something that came very loud and clear to me, and that was adoption. It was something that we talked about even before we got married. My husband and I had talked about that being a possibility for us, even not knowing that we were going to have fertility struggles. But it was in that moment that I knew that was our path. My husband didn't necessarily know that, so that was kind of another, journey we had to take. But I kind of pretty quickly after, I started hearing it, and then it just got to the point where anytime I was silent, it was very clear. So, but to me, it was just like that process of clearing the space, like getting through the grief and then allowing kind of the space to hear what I needed to be doing. And that really was like a pivotal moment for me. And for me, that it just shifted the path from like this focus on me and my body and our fertility, and allowed us to kind of shift that elsewhere. And also ended up with probably the best story of my life, because I got my son from that journey. But
So did you end up adopting your son?
We did, yeah. So after that, we kind of went down the path of adoption and, started the process. And it was like, and again, so no fertility journey is the same, no adoption journey is the same. But for us, it just was magical from the moment I started the paperwork. Like everything went, they say that, oh, it's so much paperwork and it takes so much time. Maybe that's true, but for me, it was a breeze. It was super fast. By the time we got approved and had a baby in our arms, again, it was not a long wait. It just all felt very kind of meant to be. My belief is that it was. I think we'd been approved for adoption for like a week or two. We weren't even with the agency we thought we were going to go with, but we got a call and our son was at the hospital, and we had a few hours to pick him up. And the most magical part is when we were at the hospital, I was talking with the nurses. I had on my phone, so that third miscarriage that I'd gone through that had been such a struggle. And oh man, the pregnancy was just so whole other kind of sidetrack. But dealing with a hard pregnancy after miscarriage is even more difficult, right? Because it's like you want to be grateful that you're pregnant, but then you're throwing up all day and really sick, and so trying to be grateful but also like struggling. And that's how that pregnancy was. And I'd had in my calendar like the weeks of pregnancy, And I deleted that off my desktop, but for some reason on my phone, those weeks of pregnancy stuck in my calendar.
Mm-hmm.
And when we went to pick up when we got my son at the hospital, I had looked on my calendar and I noticed that it said that I would have been 38 and a half weeks pregnant on that day. And so I talked to the nurse and I said, how far along was the mom when she gave birth? And they said 38 and a half weeks.
Whoa.
So when they told me that, I said, this is my son.
Oh my God.
This is who I've been praying for from the beginning of my pregnancy. I just didn't know it until that moment. So it definitely,
that's so beautiful.
It definitely came full circle. And, there's just never been a doubt in my mind that it's really how it was meant to be. And the whole thing felt very magical. And he's now 21 months old and just continues to be the biggest blessing of my life. So, yeah.
Oh, I'm so happy for you. That's an amazing story. So then when did you decide in your journey that now you wanted to start using that pain that you went through to then help transform other women's lives?
Yeah, it's something that's come up a lot throughout the years. So I have been an entrepreneur basically my whole life. I started a meal planning business about 10 years ago. My husband's also an entrepreneur. So I've kind of always been in the online space. And as we were going through this struggle, it was one of those things whenever my husband and I would sit down at dinner, kind of like get some time to like decompress, we would just say, there is a need, right? Like we just saw a need, especially actually the further we got into it, we would find out, we'd make these little discoveries of like maybe a test that we'd missed or, a path that we hadn't even explored because no one had mentioned like, oh, you might want to try this or this might help. And so it was through this that we're like, gosh, there really needs to be a resource for this. And for me, the big thing too is there's a lot of great infertility resources. And I know that recurrent loss and recurrent miscarriage, it's a form of infertility, but I never felt like I quite belonged in the infertility world because I was getting pregnant so frequently. So I just kind of felt a little different. And I didn't feel like there was anything really focused on that. And like, also, what should you do if you are, a lot of the tests or what the groups talk about is like how to get pregnant. Well, I kind of had that down. So early on, I definitely saw the need for it. And as I continued on, I just kept seeing that more and more. And then, so after I'm trying to think, so it was like last year we were going through it and finally, Ivan was a little bit older and the timing felt right. So I was like, I'm going to do this. We'd actually just gone through, we started down the path again of trying to conceive and had done IVF and had a failed round of IVF. And so I don't know, it was around that time I was like, I'm going to do this. So I put it all together, started the branding and, that work this past winter. And then kind of like January, I was starting to build out the website and, again, not a plan that I necessarily had, but in January, it turns out I fell pregnant. Currently still pregnant, 37 weeks.
Oh my God.
So, again, my plan was not to have the website build out and this pregnancy happen at the same time. But now that it's happened again, it kind of feels very magical and meant to be that it would happen at the same time. And, I had that was by no means my, my master plan. There's someone else in charge of that, but it's been really cool to have that happening alongside each other. And the website launched earlier this summer, and it's just been really cool. It's been because with the website, it's not just me, right? It's like bringing together a lot of experts, a lot of resources to really, create a community and help people to connect. And so it's been really cool to be able to give back in that way.
Okay, so congratulations for getting pregnant. Did you get pregnant from IVF or just naturally?
No, so our IVF cycle, we ended up with no viable embryos. So kind of crazy I think the doctor is pretty shocked because we have gotten pregnant pretty, within a few months every time we've tried. So to have that fail, and then it was maybe 1 or 2 cycles later, and it's not that we'd stopped trying, but we were actually kind of taking a step back and doing a 90-day protocol. So we were kind of 30 days into that 90-day protocol of really kind of clean eating and focusing on the supplementation and all of that. And, but we didn't stop trying, and I know my cycle and all of that. So it wasn't a complete shock, but it was a little surprising considering we just had that blow of like a failed round of IVF, which honestly was a really hard blow, because I think to us, we thought by doing the IVF, it would give us options, right? Like we could go down the path, like we could see, how many viable embryos we had, and then go down the path of maybe meat carrying, but also look into something like surrogacy. But we ended up with like 0 options from that, which was really devastating, actually.
So you did a 90 days like detox?
So, well, we were 30 days into it. And it wasn't that different. I've kind of along the way figured out, like, I don't do caffeine because caffeine's not a big deal to me. And, we've really, been pretty healthy in our eating, but we were doing we were dedicated to like 0 sugar, like I'm already gluten-free, but we were grain-free, and kind of just doing a like complete, it was kind of Whole30 basically, but then also like the no caffeine and obviously no alcohol, no sugar. And, all the supplements I've kind of been on for a few years at this point. So that wasn't a big change, lots of supplements.
Yeah. But that makes a big difference, like changing your diet and so you changed something in your chemistry that allowed the pregnancy to be successful.
And getting my husband's been a healthy eater. Now, he hadn't given up the caffeine in the past. That was a big deal for him. So I wonder if that, because we've had a few things along the way that we've discovered, and one of them is that he has DNA fragmentation on his sperm. So, there were a few different things that we were doing to kind of account for that. In terms of supplements, diet, and even just timing of everything. So I think some of that could have, you never know exactly what it is.
It's hard. Well, congrats. That's awesome.
Do you
know the gender?
Yes, a boy. So we're going to have 2 little boys.
2 boys. Oh my God. That's so great. And so now, so when you talk, so the resources that are available for women about miscarriages, so how is the framework? Is it just support? Is it like there's a way to heal? Like, what's your perspective on it?
Yeah, so where we really started was articles. So I work with a medical writer, and then I created an advisory board of 5 different fertility experts that review all of the articles, because something that I really wanted was I wanted the research. I wanted to know, like, okay, so I also found out I have a blood clotting issue, but I wanted to know like really what that meant and what the research showed. And I found online, I would kind of find like these like fluff pieces that are like, explain it how the doctor would. They would dumb it down for me, but I'm like, no, I really want to know like what the study said, like what I need to be doing. And so that's where we started, was building out some really in-depth articles on what the research says. And we're still building those out. And, again, working with experts to do that. So as a background, I'm a dietitian and have a master's in nutrition communication. So I kind of learned how to like read through studies in school and everything, but I'm not a doctor. I'm not a fertility expert, other than just having been through it myself. And so, I felt strongly about getting some experts on board to really make sure that we were in line with what we were saying. So we have doctors and OBs that we work with. So that's been really good to have that support. So that's where we started. And then, the other big piece for me is sharing stories of hope. So finding people that have kind of walked the path so you can see. I know, gosh, in the beginning, I just felt like who's gone through this? I felt like I was kind of the only one. And so just, but now the more you're in it, you realize, gosh, there's a lot out there. It's just not talked about. So finding those stories of hope, and we have those both on the website and then also a podcast where we interview people that have been through it and how they kind of came out on the other side. So sharing those stories as well. That's the other big piece of it. And then eventually we're working on, I have a course that's going to help people kind of navigate the next steps and figure out how to move forward. Because to me, that's where it's like, going back to what you were asking about, the story of like, you have options, but in the moment you don't feel like you do. And so helping people to kind of see that bigger picture, maybe give them options that, a doctor may just send you down a certain path, but there are other, options. And, we explored a lot of those. We went down the path of adoption, and now we're going down, the path of, biological child. And, but none of those options are, it's just giving people the chance to see that all of those are out there. Or even, deciding to not have kids, like that is an option. And a doctor's not going to tell you that and like let you explore that. So,
yeah. So it's a safe place where people can explore their reproductive journey.
Yeah, and just see that bigger picture. I think a lot of times it feels like, oh, you have to do this next step. Well, no, take a step back, breathe, check in with yourself. And that's the other big thing of just like, check in with yourself. What feels right for you? Like, it doesn't matter what the outside world is saying. Like, you need to check in with you, and what are you comfortable with? What do you want to do? And the choice really is ultimately like, you can decide that. So giving people kind of the tools to advocate for themselves.
And it's for women that are going through IVF or IUI, and also women that are naturally trying to get pregnant.
Yep, all of the above, whatever, kind of path is right for them.
Okay. Yeah, because I feel like the IVF, all women that suffer miscarriages, it's sad. And I also feel like the women that are going through the IVF cycle, the chemical pregnancies, I feel like, are so devastating, like what you were mentioning, that you feel like you're pregnant, you have all the signs, and then you go get tested and there's nothing there. And I've just seen so many women break down, and I'm so happy that you're offering this type of service for them and other women that need it, because it's so important. And what about the male factor? Is there a support for the fathers?
Yeah, so we're wrapping that in kind of gradually. It is definitely more targeted toward the women, but like just this past week, we actually had a father that was on the podcast to give that male perspective. And definitely on the resource side of things, we've included some articles on research into male factors, because I found, for me, there were certain tests that like we saw 5 or 6 doctors before anyone gave my husband that sperm fragmentation test, which he ended up having, and it changed, the protocol that we used. And so to me, it's just crazy when they're like, well, you're getting pregnant, so he must be fine. Well, that's not true. The embryo is still a 50-50 embryo. And there can be, sperm DNA fragmentation is a very good example of like that can lead to miscarriage. So, there's a lot that I think sometimes with miscarriage, you think, well, you're getting pregnant, so you don't need to look at that. But the egg quality and sperm quality are still very important and sometimes overlooked. So yeah, we're definitely trying to make sure that that's a part of the puzzle.
Yeah, absolutely. And I often tell that to my couples as well, that it's also the male. Like, he also needs to be on the supplements, doing the dietary change, and also making those lifestyle changes to support the pregnancy. Because you're right, it's 50-50. Like, it's not just
And anyone that says he doesn't need to be tested for anything, that's just not true. So, yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's like an endless cycle. Yeah. Okay. So let me ask you some infinite love questions that I ask all my guests. How do you use love in your work?
Oh gosh, I think my work really, it stems from love, right? I think, building a family and wanting children, that's kind of, to me, the definition of love. The second that I held my son in my arms, like that's like the deepest love you'll ever know. So to me, my work is helping other women to kind of find that love on their own.
Nice. And how do you feel that your work is used to uplift humanity?
Oh gosh, if I can help one person that was in shoes similar to me that kind of felt very alone and lost, I mean, then in some ways my work is done. I mean, I'll keep going, right? I'm hoping to help as many as I can, but yeah, there's such a need to lift women up when they're going through this and to help them realize that they really aren't alone. They did not cause it. I mean, that's the biggest hurdle too, is the first thought is always like, what did I do? Looking back over the few weeks and trying to find, have that guilt and shame and help people to realize that that's just not the case.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Like it's really important to move past whatever you're moving through, to recognize that it's not all self-inflicted, that there are circumstances outside yourself that can be changed to support whatever you want to achieve, for sure. So what does it mean for you to be a positive force of goodness in the world?
Oh, wow. To be a positive force of goodness is just to, share. The journey was hard, right? Like I had a lot of like down moments, but then I've had so many, like I talked about, I kind of call them my magical moments, and to be able to kind of share that with the world so they can see that it is possible and help them to have hope. I mean, that's why I have hope in the name of the companies. I think that that's the thing that's needed more than anything is, when you're in a low time in your life, you need to somehow find hope. And sometimes just by seeing other people that have gone through something similar, you can build up that hope.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole premise of this podcast, is to demonstrate when people go through really traumatic, painful events in their life, that there is a path to healing. And love is one of the ways you can do that, but there's lifestyle, there's willingness, there's awareness, there's so many different ways of getting to a point where you're transformed, and that painful situation created a purpose in your life. And you could look back and be like, that happened for a reason. And now I can actually take this experience and help other people if I choose to. Not everyone chooses to do that. But for those that do, it's really powerful, because you would be able to do what you're doing today had you not gone through all those unfortunately painful situations.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's beauty in the pain. You just have to wait for it and be patient.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So these are the fun questions. What do you currently love most about your life?
Just my family. I like being able to, like having is he 21 months? He'll be 21 months in a few days. Having a 21-month-old. I mean, that is like pure entertainment. And being able to just experience pregnancy too. Like I got to the point, so when we chose to go the route of adoption, something that I grappled with was, am I okay if I go through life and don't experience like a full-term pregnancy? And I came to the decision that I was okay with that. And then, have obviously now I'm very grateful that I get to experience it. So getting to experience pregnancy has just been the biggest blessing that I wasn't sure that I would get to experience, and have that, and then, have my son experience it right alongside with me. It's been so beautiful. It's like getting to have all of us together. And I know 2020 has been a very strange year, but in some ways it's been a blessing that my entire family has got to be home. My husband often travels a lot for work, but he's been here the entire time and has been a really big support. I had a very rough 20 weeks of pregnancy,
the first trimester.
Get out of bed, and I was nonstop throwing up. So I've really only enjoyed the last few months of it, but the last months have been pretty spectacular. So.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. How do you feel you receive love?
Oh gosh. Through gratitude, I think. I think a lot of times I feel like love is all around you. You just have to you have to recognize it. And for me, like, gratitude really helps me to be aware that it's there. I mean, I think that's especially true when you look at like relationships, right? Like a husband and wife, a male, female is kind of very prime example of, he may be giving you all the love, but you're just, you kind of give and receive it in different ways. And so for me, having a gratitude practice of writing down what I'm grateful for, my husband and I each night share 3 things that we appreciate about the other from the day. And things like that really help me to realize that the love is there when sometimes you don't. It's easy to kind of like gloss over it, I think.
I love that practice that you and your husband share. I think that's a really important one, to really validate how you feel about each other, because I feel like it's very, very easy to take other people for granted. So I think it's important that you maintain that, and that's beautiful. Yeah.
And it's sometimes surprising the things that they notice throughout the day. I'm like, oh, I didn't even know you noticed I did that. So, good way to end the day.
Yeah, totally. And when do you feel the most love? So I asked you, how do you feel the most love? When do you feel the most love?
When I'm with those that I love. So, when I'm with my son or my husband, or I have 2 cats. And I mean, I've got to be honest, I feel like pets are pets are love. I don't know. I'm into my cats. My husband laughs at me, but I feel like by watching my cats, I'm like, they're just pure love. So, but I think anytime you're around, and when I'm with my friends, unfortunately this year has been a harder year, but even when I'm, with a close girlfriend or something too, I just think when you're around those that you love, you can feel it. And it's really special. Yeah.
Well, this last question you've already mentioned, but we'll ask it again. Where has love created a miracle in your life?
Oh yeah, I mean my family is a miracle. Both of my babies are miracle babies in their own way, and both of them are just magical, right? I know I keep using that word, but I feel like they're both little miracles. And other people that have been on any sort of path of infertility, I know any mom like loves and appreciates your child, but if you've been on the path of infertility, it makes that first year, at least for me, it made that first year so much easier, because it's like you waited so long that there was nothing that he threw at me that first year that was like I wasn't ready to take on. So it's like you're just so ready for it. Right.
You appreciate the fact that you get to be a mom.
Yeah.
For sure. And I wanted to ask you, because I was curious about, you mentioned before you got your first son that you had a prayer practice. So can you tell us a little bit more about specifically, like, how do you pray, and like what was your methodology around that?
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, it changes and evolves over time. But I remember at that time specifically, so I have done transcendental meditation.
Okay.
So at the time, what I was doing, and actually I don't even do this currently, but I was doing kind of a 20-minute meditation first to kind of get like grounded. And then afterwards, I would just kind of sit still and listen. So during the meditation, I really tried to clear my head, but then after, I would have questions maybe I really just had one question, like, what should I do? Right. Like, it was kind of like the question was there. So I didn't really have to like get like super specific and ask it, because I was like kind of just like one burning thing of like, what do I do? Like, how do I get through this? And I feel like when I get quiet enough, there's a few times where I can hear something. I'm like, okay, I know this is a message from God. I mean, that's how I feel. And it was, so the adoption thing came up. And then the other thing that came up a lot, and this is something I share through the Miscarriage Hope Desk resources, was don't do, just be, which is really not what you want to hear when you're going through a fertility journey and you like want to do everything you can. And it was just a good reminder, though, that like, yes, you want to like take the right steps and take the actions that feel right for you, but like, don't try and do it all. You really just have to kind of get calm and centered. And when I did that, that's when I realized like, oh gosh, like I'm really feeling called to adopt. So yeah, it was the meditation coupled with just the listening more than anything. And then the other piece of it was anytime I was in my car, so we live in the country, and I have about an hour drive into Austin. So when I'm in the car, one, that's when the tears come and I let them. So if I had a long drive, I would maybe cry, but then afterwards I would just get really silent in the car. And that's when I feel like I would kind of hear things that would come to me and hear some answers. So I just think for me, my advice would be anyone that wants to kind of hear some of that or pray, just figure out how you can get quiet and where that is for you. Maybe it's a car, maybe it's a shower or a long walk, but to me, that's kind of been the key, is like creating the space and really just like putting the phone down, putting the technology down, and kind of tapping into that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing, because I think that's such a valid point to start to go inward, because I feel like whenever you're in a situation where you're in a lot of pain, you're always looking for outside sources to help alleviate that, when really the power comes from within. Like being able to just go inside yourself and really start to figure out what you need and what is being called to you, what you're being called to do. And that's where the miracles happen. So I think you're a perfect example of that. So thank you for sharing. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Allison. This has been wonderful. Where can people find you or find the website?
Yeah, so the website's Miscarriage Hope Desk. Our social channels are also Instagram and Facebook. We're Miscarriage Hope Desk, so that's the best place to find me.
Okay, and I'll have all your information in the show notes. Thank you so much for being on the show. I really loved your story, and I hope that people can reach out to you in their time of need. It's a great service that you're offering.
Well, thank you for having me. I really love what you're doing, and I love the premise behind all of this. So keep going with it. It's awesome.
Thank you. Sending you lots of love. Bye. Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe and tune in on Tuesdays for new episodes. For more information about me, please follow me on Instagram at Corinne J. Camara and my website, CorinneCamara.com. Sending you lots of infinite love.